Welcome back to another incredible story of humility and unexpected revelations. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. Now, let me tell you about a tale that unfolded in one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants, where a waitress's preconceptions led to an encounter she would never forget. In the glittering world of fine dining, where crystal glasses caught the light of custom chandeliers and the gentle murmur of conversation floated through the air like an expensive perfume, a simple misunderstanding was about to transform into an unforgettable lesson about judging others. The night started like any other at La Maison d'Or, Chicago's crown jewel of haute cuisine, but it would end very differently for one particular server named Eileen. The restaurant's reputation had always attracted the elite of Chicago society, from business moguls to celebrities, but tonight's service would prove especially memorable. The autumn air outside carried a slight chill, but inside, the atmosphere was warm with the glow of success and privilege. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors, reflecting the sophisticated decor that had made this establishment a symbol of luxury dining for over 2 decades. Eileen had been working at La Maison d'Or for 3 years, and she prided herself on being able to read her customers like open books. She could spot old money from new, tech entrepreneurs from finance bros, and she had developed quite a reputation among her colleagues for her astute observations and witty commentary about the clientele. Her sharp tongue and sharper wit had earned her both admirers and critics among the staff, but tonight, her confidence in her ability to judge character would be severely tested. The evening began with its usual rhythm, the soft clink of fine china, the pop of champagne corks, and the sophisticated murmur of high society conversation. Eileen moved through her section with practiced grace, her crisp black uniform and perfectly styled hair reflecting the restaurant's impeccable standards. She had already served 3 tables of Chicago's elite, including a well-known surgeon and a local news anchor, when the host approached her with news of a new table assignment. The man who would be seated in her section had arrived wearing what she would later describe to her colleagues as dressed-down attire, a simple black crew neck sweater and dark jeans. While not exactly casual, his clothing choice stood out in a sea of tailored suits and designer dresses. What caught Eileen's attention wasn't just his attire, but his quiet demeanor. He didn't demand attention or make a show of his arrival like many of their regular patrons did. As she approached his table, Eileen's lips curved into a slight smirk. She had seen this type before, or so she thought. In her mind, this was probably someone who had saved up for months to have one fancy dinner, or perhaps won a gift card. Either way, she had already decided this wouldn't be a table worth her premier service. The man sat alone, studying the menu with careful consideration. His calm demeanor and relaxed posture suggested he was comfortable in the space, but Eileen had already made up her mind about the type of customer he would be. She couldn't have known that this man had not only dined in some of the world's finest restaurants but owned several of them. She couldn't have known that his simple sweater cost more than her monthly rent, or that his understated watch was worth more than a luxury car. What Eileen also didn't know was that this man was Michael Jordan himself, who had recently acquired ownership of La Maison d'Or as part of his expanding restaurant empire. He had decided to do what he often did with new acquisitions, experience the service as a regular customer before making his ownership known to the staff. It was his way of understanding the true character of his establishments and their employees. As Eileen approached the table, her posture carried a subtle air of condescension. She had already decided this customer didn't belong in her section, much less in this restaurant. The irony of her assumption would soon become apparent, but for now, she was content in her misguided judgment. "Good evening," she said, her tone carrying just a hint of dismissiveness. "Can I start you with our water selection? We have sparkling, still, or tap." The way she emphasized tap carried an unmistakable suggestion that this might be more within his budget range. The man looked up from his menu with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Those eyes, had Eileen been paying proper attention, she might have recognized them from countless photographs and advertisements. Instead, she was too focused on her own preconceptions to notice the subtle signs of who was really sitting at her table. "Still water would be fine," he replied, his voice carrying a quiet authority that Eileen completely missed. "And I'd like to see the wine list as well." His request for the wine list, which at La Maison d'Or was a leather-bound tome featuring bottles that could cost more than a car, made Helene's smirk deepen slightly. What followed was a service experience that would later become legendary among the restaurant staff, though not for the reasons Helene would have wished. With each interaction, she became more convinced of her initial assessment, and with each assumption, she dug herself deeper into what would soon become a profound lesson in humility. The man ordered with the confidence of someone who knew fine cuisine intimately, selecting dishes without hesitation and requesting wine pairings with each course. Yet Helene's attitude remained unchanged. She continued to serve him with a barely concealed air of superiority, making subtle comments about the prices and complexity of the dishes he selected. "The Wagyu beef is quite expensive," she said at one point, emphasizing the last word with what she thought was helpful concern. "Perhaps I could recommend something more accessible?" The man simply smiled and retained his selection, his patience as yet unbroken. As the evening progressed, other servers began to notice Helene's behavior toward the quiet man in her section. A few of the more experienced staff members exchanged worried glances, but none intervened. They could sense something was about to unfold, though none could have predicted exactly how the night would end. The restaurant's general manager, Thomas, had been watching the situation develop with growing concern. He had recognized their owner immediately upon his arrival, but, understanding the purpose of these incognito visits, had instructed the staff to treat him as they would any other guest. Now, as he observed Helene's continued condescension, he found himself torn between maintaining the charade and preventing what could become a serious situation. Little did Helene know, but every subtle slight, every condescending remark, and every dismissive gesture was being noted with careful attention. The man at her table wasn't just any customer, he was someone who had built his legacy not just on athletic excellence, but on an acute understanding of business and human nature. He had faced prejudice and preconceptions throughout his life and had learned to use such moments as opportunities for teaching valuable lessons. As the evening wore on, the man remained unfailingly polite, even as Helene's behavior bordered on inappropriate. He answered her condescending suggestions with grace, met her subtle jabs with dignity, and maintained his composure in a way that would later serve to make the lesson even more powerful. The other diners, most of whom were regulars at La Maison d'Or, began to take notice of the situation. Several had recognized the restaurant's new owner, and they watched with a mixture of anticipation and secondhand embarrassment as Helene continued to dig herself deeper. The tension in the air grew thicker with each passing moment, like a storm gathering strength before breaking. What would happen next would not only change Helene's perspective forever but would become a story shared throughout Chicago's restaurant community, a cautionary tale about the dangers of judging books by their covers, and a powerful reminder that true class has nothing to do with how someone dresses or what they own, but everything to do with how they treat others. The stage was set for a revelation that would shake Helene's world to its core and teach her a lesson she would never forget. But that moment of truth was still to come, and for now, she remained blissfully unaware of the magnitude of her misjudgment, continuing to serve the quiet man in the simple sweater with an air of superiority that would soon come back to haunt her. As the evening progressed at La Maison d'Or, the subtle dance between the unsuspecting waitress and the undercover owner began to take on new dimensions. The gentle hum of conversation throughout the restaurant provided a stark contrast to the growing tension at table 23, where Michael Jordan sat with remarkable patience, observing everything while appearing to observe nothing at all. Helene's next interaction with her simple customer came when she returned to check on his appetizer course. The man had ordered the restaurant's most expensive starter, a delicate arrangement of fresh black truffles and foie gras that cost more than what most people spent on a week's worth of groceries. To her surprise, he seemed to know exactly how to appreciate such a refined dish, but this only served to deepen her skepticism. "Is everything satisfactory?" she asked, her tone carrying that same hint of condescension that had colored all their previous interactions. "The chef can prepare it differently if it's not quite what you're used to." The subtle emphasis on used to carried clear implications about what she thought he might normally eat. The man dabbed his mouth with his napkin, a gesture that spoke of years of familiarity with fine dining. "It's excellent," he replied simply. "Please give my compliments to Chef Marcus." The fact that he knew the chef's name caught Eileen off guard for a moment, but she quickly rationalized it as something he must have read online while researching the restaurant. At a nearby table, a group of regular patrons who had recognized Jordan watched the scene unfold with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. One of them, a prominent Chicago businessman, had to hide his smile behind his wine glass as he witnessed Eileen's continued misreading of the situation. These regulars had seen Jordan in various high-end establishments around the city and knew his preference for understated elegance over flashy displays of wealth. The restaurant's general manager, Thomas, continued to observe from a discreet distance, his anxiety growing with each passing moment. He had worked in luxury restaurants for over 2 decades and had seen plenty of staff members learn difficult lessons about judging customers, but never with stakes quite this high. The fact that this was happening on the very night their new owner had chosen to do an incognito visit made it all the more significant. As the evening wore on, Eileen's behavior began to draw more attention from her fellow staff members. Sarah, a veteran server with 15 years of experience, tried to catch her eye and signal her to tone down the attitude, but Eileen remained oblivious to these warnings. She was too caught up in her own narrative about the customer who, in her mind, didn't belong in her section. When it came time for the main course, Jordan ordered the chef's special, a dry-aged tomahawk steak that required advance reservation and came with a price tag that could cover a month's car payment. Eileen couldn't help but interject with another condescending suggestion. "Sir, you should know that this particular cut is quite substantial. Perhaps something more manageable would be better suited." Jordan's response was measured and calm, carrying a hint of amusement that went completely over Eileen's head. "I think I can handle it," he said, a subtle reference to his athletic background that would later make her cringe in remembrance. "I've worked up quite an appetite over the years." The other servers watched in amazement as Eileen continued to miss every sign of who she was really dealing with. From his perfect posture to his expert wine selections, from his knowledge of fine cuisine to the quiet authority he exuded, everything about him screamed sophistication and success to those who knew what to look for. But Eileen's preconceptions had created such a strong blind spot that she remained completely unaware. As she walked back to the kitchen to place his order, she couldn't resist making a few comments to her colleagues. "Can you believe this guy? Comes in here dressed like he's going to a casual Friday at the office, then orders like he's dining with the Queen." Her words carried through the service area, causing several of the more experienced staff members to exchange worried glances. What Eileen didn't notice was how the kitchen staff reacted when she called out the order for table 23. Chef Marcus himself paused what he was doing, glancing up with a knowing look. He had been informed of the owner's presence by Thomas and was ensuring that every dish that left his kitchen was absolute perfection. The chef had worked in restaurants owned by Jordan before and knew his reputation for excellence. Back in the dining room, the atmosphere continued to shift subtly. More diners had begun to recognize Jordan, and word was spreading quietly through the restaurant. The gentle murmur of conversation now carried an undercurrent of anticipation, as though the entire room was waiting for the moment when Eileen would finally realize her mistake. Jordan, for his part, maintained his composed demeanor, though those who knew him well might have recognized the slight glint in his eye, the same look he used to get before making a game-winning play. He was using this experience to assess not just Eileen's service, but the overall culture of the restaurant he had recently acquired. Every interaction, every reaction from other staff members, and every response from nearby diners was providing him with valuable insights. When the main course arrived, Eileen's attitude had evolved from mere condescension to something approaching pity. She set down the perfectly prepared tomahawk steak with an air of someone humoring an out-of-place guest. "Will you be needing any instruction on how to properly cut this type of meat?" she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. The irony of her offering dining advice to someone who owned multiple steakhouses seemed to amuse several nearby diners, one of whom had to quickly turn a laugh into a cough. Jordan simply smiled and assured her he would manage just fine, his patience appearing endless in the face of her continued assumptions. As the evening progressed toward its inevitable revelation, the tension in the restaurant continued to build. Other servers had begun to position themselves strategically around the dining room, not wanting to miss what they sensed would be an unforgettable moment. Even the bartender had slowed his usually efficient movements, keeping one eye on table 23 while preparing drinks. What made the situation even more remarkable was how Jordan's behavior provided a masterclass in grace under pressure. Despite Ellene's constant microaggressions and condescending comments, he remained perfectly polite, tipping generously for each course and treating every staff member with respect. His actions were setting up a stark contrast that would make the coming revelation even more impactful. The other diners had become increasingly invested in the unfolding drama. Several had discreetly taken out their phones, anticipating a social media-worthy moment. The restaurant's regular photographers, who usually focused on capturing special occasions for guests, found themselves gravitating toward this section of the dining room, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Thomas, the general manager, had by now stationed himself closer to table 23. He knew that the moment of truth was approaching, and he wanted to be nearby when it happened. His years of experience told him that such situations could either become PR disasters or teaching moments, and much would depend on how the revelation was handled. As Jordan finished his main course, Ellene approached with the dessert menu, still completely unaware of the identity of her customer or the growing attention from the rest of the restaurant. She held the menu out with that same air of superiority that had characterized her service all evening, about to make one final mistake that would serve as the catalyst for her imminent revelation. The stage was now perfectly set for the moment when Ellene's world would be turned upside down. The quiet man in the simple sweater had demonstrated exemplary patience throughout the evening, but the time was coming for a lesson that would reshape not just Ellene's perspective, but the entire culture of Le Maison d'Or. The next few moments would become the stuff of restaurant legend, a story that would be told and retold throughout Chicago's dining scene for years to come. The pivotal moment at Le Maison d'Or was about to unfold, triggered by what seemed like an innocent question about dessert. Ellene approached table 23 with the leather-bound dessert menu, her demeanor unchanged despite the mounting tension in the restaurant that everyone but her could feel. The quiet man in the simple sweater had just finished his main course, and the stage was set for what would become a legendary moment in Chicago's restaurant scene. "Would you like to see our dessert menu?" Ellene asked, her tone suggesting she doubted he'd be interested in such refined offerings. "We have some simpler options if the traditional French desserts aren't to your taste." The condescension in her voice had reached new heights, as though she were doing him a favor by offering alternatives. Michael Jordan looked up from his empty plate, that famous competitive glint now clearly visible in his eyes. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had led teams to championships, "I'd like to try the Grand Marnier soufflé. I understand Chef Marcus makes one of the best in Chicago." The sophistication of his choice and his familiarity with the chef's signature dessert caused several nearby diners to exchange knowing looks. Ellene's eyebrows rose slightly. The soufflé was not only the most expensive dessert on the menu but required advance ordering due to its preparation time. "Sir," she began, her voice dripping with false concern, "perhaps I should mention that the soufflé is a very particular taste. And given its price point..." She let the implication hang in the air. It was at this moment that Thomas, the general manager, decided he could no longer stand by and watch. He approached the table with practiced grace, his presence causing Ellene to straighten her posture instinctively. "Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now hushed restaurant, "I trust everything has been to your satisfaction this evening?" The effect of those words was immediate and electric. Ellene's face, which had been set in an expression of superiority just moments before, suddenly drained of all color. Her eyes widened as recognition finally dawned, and the dessert menu she had been holding dropped to her side. Around the restaurant, several diners couldn't suppress their smiles any longer. Jordan's response was measured and diplomatic. "The food has been excellent, Thomas. Though I must say, the service has been educational." His choice of words carried layers of meaning that made several nearby diners hide their grins behind their napkins. The famous Jordan competitive spirit was showing through, but in a way that would teach rather than destroy. Ellene stood frozen, her mind racing back through every interaction of the evening. Every condescending comment, every subtle slight, every assumption she had made about the man in the simple sweater came crashing back with devastating clarity. She had spent the entire evening talking down to Michael Jordan, not just a basketball legend, but now her boss. The revelation rippled through the restaurant like a wave. Those who hadn't already recognized Jordan were now fully aware of his presence, and the significance of what they had witnessed throughout the evening became clear. Phones remained discreetly lowered, but the story was already beginning to spread through Chicago's social circles. Eileen stammered, her usual confidence evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. But before she could form a coherent sentence, Jordan raised his hand slightly, a gesture that immediately commanded attention from everyone in the vicinity. "Please," he said, his voice carrying that same quiet authority that had characterized his entire career, "bring me that soufflé. And perhaps you'd like to join me for a moment while it's being prepared. I think we have some things to discuss." The words were delivered without anger, but with a firmness that left no room for argument. Thomas gracefully guided Eileen to sit in the chair opposite Jordan, her legs barely supporting her as the full weight of the situation settled on her shoulders. The restaurant had grown so quiet that the gentle clink of silverware seemed thunderous. Every eye in the establishment was now fixed on table 23, though most tried to maintain the pretense of focusing on their own meals. "Miss Eileen," Jordan began, using her name for the first time that evening, "I've spent my career being judged by others. Sometimes for my abilities, sometimes for my appearance, sometimes for the way I choose to present myself." His words carried the weight of decades of experience, both on and off the court. "But I learned early on that true character isn't about how someone looks, or what they're wearing, or even how much money they appear to have." The other servers had gathered at discreet distances, all pretending to be busy with various tasks while straining to hear every word. The lesson unfolding before them was one that would be remembered and repeated in service industry circles for years to come. "I've owned restaurants for many years," Jordan continued, his voice remaining calm and measured. "And one thing I've learned is that great service isn't about assuming what a guest can or can't afford. It's about treating every person who walks through that door with the same level of respect and dignity." Eileen's face had progressed from pale to bright red, her eyes fixed on the pristine white tablecloth as though it might offer some escape from this moment. The magnitude of her misjudgment was still sinking in, each memory of her earlier behavior now feeling like a physical weight on her shoulders. "When I bought Le Maison d'Or," Jordan continued, causing Eileen's head to snap up in surprise at this additional revelation, "I didn't just buy a restaurant. I bought into a legacy of excellence in service and cuisine. But excellence isn't just about the food or the wine list. It's about creating an environment where every guest feels valued, regardless of their appearance or attire." The lesson being delivered was masterful in its execution. Jordan wasn't just addressing Eileen's behavior, he was setting expectations for every staff member within earshot. The message was clear: prejudging guests based on appearance had no place in his establishment. "I'm not going to fire you, Eileen," he said, causing her to release a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That wouldn't teach anything to anyone. Instead, I want you to take this experience and learn from it. Share it with others. Make it mean something." Around the restaurant, other diners had become completely invested in the scene playing out before them. Many were longtime business leaders themselves, and they recognized the skillful way Jordan was handling the situation, turning what could have been a moment of humiliation into an opportunity for growth and learning. "Starting tomorrow," Jordan continued, "you'll be training with Thomas for the next month. You'll learn about wine, about service, about creating an environment of genuine hospitality. But most importantly, you'll learn about checking your assumptions at the door." The soufflé arrived at this moment, perfectly timed and expertly prepared. Chef Marcus had outdone himself, creating a masterpiece of French pastry that rose well above the rim of its ramekin, golden brown and fragrant with orange essence. Jordan accepted it with a gracious nod, then surprised everyone by requesting a second spoon. "Join me," he said to Eileen, whose eyes widened in surprise. "Let's start your education right now. This soufflé really is one of the best in Chicago." The gesture was both a power move and an olive branch, a demonstration that true class means having the ability to humble someone while simultaneously offering them a path to redemption. As they shared the dessert, Jordan began explaining the intricacies of the dish, its history, and why it had become a benchmark of fine French cuisine. His knowledge was extensive and casually delivered, each word driving home the point about how wrong Eline's assumptions had been. The other diners watched this masterclass in leadership and teaching unfold, many making mental notes to share this story in boardrooms and business meetings for years to come. It was a perfect example of how to correct behavior while preserving dignity, how to teach a lesson while building rather than destroying. As the evening drew to a close, the story of what had happened at Le Maison d'Or was already spreading through Chicago's social circles. But it wasn't being shared as a tale of humiliation or comeuppance. Instead, it was being told as a story of leadership, of teaching, and of the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. The story of what happened that night at Le Maison d'Or didn't end with the shared soufflé. In fact, what transpired in the following hours and days would become just as legendary as the initial revelation. The impact of Michael Jordan's lesson rippled through Chicago's restaurant community, transforming one waitress's humbling experience into a watershed moment for service industry professionals across the city. As the evening drew to a close, Jordan stood from table 23, his commanding presence now impossible for anyone to miss. The restaurant had remained unusually quiet, every guest and staff member aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Eline, still processing the events of the evening, stood as well, her usual confidence replaced by a new sense of humility. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp," Jordan said, his voice carrying the same authority that had once commanded basketball courts worldwide. "I'll be here with Thomas to begin your advanced service training." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "This isn't punishment, Eline. It's an opportunity. The question is, what will you do with it?" The other diners watched as Jordan made his way toward the exit, stopping briefly to shake hands with Chef Marcus, who had emerged from the kitchen. The chef's usual professional demeanor broke into a genuine smile as he exchanged words with his new owner. Their interaction provided yet another stark contrast to how Eline had treated Jordan throughout the evening. As Jordan departed, the restaurant erupted into excited chatter. Regular patrons who had witnessed the entire evening's events began sharing their observations with their dinner companions. "Did you see how he handled that?" one CO whispered to his colleagues. "No anger, no public humiliation, just pure class and leadership." The staff, meanwhile, had gathered in small groups, discussing what they had witnessed and its implications for their own service approach. Sarah, the veteran server who had tried to warn Eline earlier, was already using the evening's events as a teaching moment for some of the newer staff members. "You see," she explained to a cluster of wide-eyed servers, "this is why we treat every guest like they're the most important person in the room. Not because they might be famous or wealthy or powerful, but because that's what true hospitality means." Her words carried extra weight now, backed by the evening's powerful demonstration. Thomas, the general manager, approached Eline as she stood rooted to her spot, still staring at the door through which Jordan had departed. "Take the rest of the night off," he said kindly. "Process what happened. But be ready tomorrow morning. When Michael Jordan offers to teach you about service excellence, you don't waste a single minute of that opportunity." The next morning arrived with a sense of anticipation at Le Maison d'Or. Staff members who weren't even scheduled to work found excuses to come in early. They all wanted to witness the beginning of what would become known in Chicago restaurant circles as the Jordan Service Standards. True to his word, Jordan arrived precisely at 8, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that served as yet another reminder of how appearances could be deceiving. The previous night's simple sweater had been replaced by bespoke elegance, but his demeanor remained the same, focused, authoritative, and ready to teach. Eline arrived 15 minutes early, her uniform pressed to perfection, her notebook ready. The shame of the previous evening had transformed into determination. She had spent the night reflecting on her actions and assumptions, recognizing that she had been given an opportunity that most in her position would never receive. "First lesson," Jordan began, as they sat at the same table from the previous evening, "is about observation. Real observation, not assumption. He gestured to Thomas, who placed 3 different wine glasses on the table. "Tell me what you see." For the next hour, Jordan led Eileen through an intensive course in the subtle details that separate good service from exceptional service. He shared stories from his own experiences as both a guest and an owner, each anecdote carefully chosen to illustrate a critical point about hospitality and judgment. "You know," he said at one point, "I've been underestimated my whole life. Cut from my high school basketball team, told I wasn't good enough, didn't have what it takes." His words carried the weight of personal experience. But those moments taught me something valuable: never judge someone's potential by your first impression. As the morning progressed, other staff members found reasons to pass by, each hoping to catch snippets of Jordan's impromptu masterclass in service excellence. His teachings weren't just about wine knowledge or proper serving techniques. They were about understanding human nature, about recognizing and overcoming biases, about the fundamental principles of true hospitality. Word of what was happening at La Maison d'Or spread quickly through Chicago's restaurant community. By lunchtime, the restaurant's phones were ringing constantly with reservation requests. Everyone wanted to dine at the establishment that had become the center of the city's most talked-about service revolution. Jordan's approach to teaching Eileen became a case study in effective leadership. He was firm but fair, demanding but encouraging. Each lesson was designed not just to improve her service skills, but to transform her understanding of what it means to work in hospitality. The greatest athletes, the most successful business people, the true leaders in any field, Jordan explained, they all share one crucial trait: they never stop learning. Today, you're learning about wine and service. But the real lesson is about humility and growth. As the day progressed, Eileen's transformation became visible to everyone around her. The previous night's humbling experience, combined with Jordan's mentorship, was reshaping her approach to service. Her former attitude of superiority was being replaced by genuine curiosity and a desire to learn. "The training you're receiving," Jordan told her during their afternoon session, "isn't just for you. I expect you to share these lessons with others. True growth isn't just about personal improvement, it's about lifting those around you." By the end of that first day, the story of Eileen's experience had evolved from a cautionary tale about judgment to an inspiring story of transformation and leadership. Jordan had taken what could have been a moment of simple humiliation and turned it into a powerful lesson about growth, service, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. The impact of that evening and its aftermath would be felt throughout Chicago's restaurant scene for years to come. La Maison d'Or became known not just for its excellent cuisine, but for its exceptional service culture. The Jordan standards, as they came to be known, set a new benchmark for hospitality excellence. Eileen herself emerged from the experience transformed. The month of training under Jordan and Thomas changed not just her approach to service, but her entire worldview. She became known as one of the city's most respected servers, often sharing her story with new staff members as a powerful lesson about assumptions and opportunity. "Remember," she would tell them, "I once served Michael Jordan as if he didn't belong in a fine dining restaurant. But instead of firing me, he taught me what true service means. That's the day I learned that real luxury isn't about what you wear or how much money you have, it's about how you treat people." The story spread beyond Chicago, becoming a talking point in hospitality schools and management training programs across the country. It exemplified how a potential PR disaster could be transformed into a powerful teaching moment through skilled leadership and a commitment to growth rather than punishment. Jordan's handling of the situation became a case study in effective management. Instead of public humiliation or termination, he had chosen education and development. His approach demonstrated that true leadership isn't about wielding power, but about using influence to create positive change. As for La Maison d'Or, the restaurant's reputation soared to new heights. The combination of Jordan's ownership and the now famous service standards created a dining experience that was unmatched in the city. Reservations became even harder to secure, with guests eager to experience the legendary service transformation firsthand. The evening that began with prejudgment and assumptions ended up changing not just one server's career, but an entire restaurant's culture. It served as a powerful reminder that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from our most humbling moments, and that true excellence in any field requires constant learning and growth. And so, what could have been a story of embarrassment and shame became instead a tale of transformation and redemption. It proved that sometimes the most powerful teaching moments come not from punishment, but from someone taking the time to show us a better way. Remember, as you've watched the story unfold, that we all make assumptions, we all carry biases, and we all have moments of judgment. The real question is, what do we do with those moments when they're revealed to us? Do we defend our assumptions, or do we take them as opportunities to grow and learn? Let us know in the comments below about a time when your assumptions were proven wrong and what you learned from that experience. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of redemption, transformation, and the power of learning from our mistakes. Thanks for watching, and remember, true character isn't about how others judge you, but how you treat others regardless of how they judge you. See you in the next video.